Okay, this is a book review. The name of the book is called The Dream of Reason by Anthony Gottlieb. I'll show you the cover of the book right here. Big surprise, he's talking about the ancient Greeks. He's got the picture of the School of Athens, The other great philosophy book, The Light in the Cave, also had a picture of the School of Athens on the cover. This guy, Anthony Gottlieb, he got a master's degree in philosophy at Oxford. He's a pretty smart guy. He was the editor of the famous magazine called The Economist. Okay, so what's good about this book? He himself was a major in philosophy, which really doesn't impress me too much. Philosophy majors are usually BS artists, okay? What do? They play trivial word games, okay? The greatest philosopher who ever lived was Aristotle. He summarized useful knowledge. Most philosophers sit there and they nitpick about BS. All right, so what did I like about the book? When I first started listening to it, he goes into a lot of detail, everything that's known about Pythagoras and the other pre-Socratic philosophers, about how Pythagoras' interest in music and geometry and reincarnation, had a big influence on Plato. So Plato was in many ways a Pythagorean. And then he talks about the contrast between Plato and Aristotle, which I like, and also about Socrates. So he went through all these people that you don't hear much about: Parmenides, Heraclitus, Democritus, Empedocles, and Anaxagoras. Okay, lots of them. So he really gave it a legitimate effort to give you, in their own words, these ancient Greek philosophers. And so I found myself, like I said, at first thinking it was kind of ridiculous, some of the silly ideas of the earliest philosophers, but then I started to like it. Because you could almost imagine yourself being born for the first time with very little knowledge available on earth, and you have to figure out everything as you go along, which is kind of what the ancient Greeks did. Most of the other cultures of the ancient world were pretty stupid, okay? There'd be some tyrant who just says, do what I say or I'll kick your butt. Versus the ancient Greeks, they had enough free speech, they were able to write do their own writings and whatnot, have their own schools of philosophy, and they're trying to figure things out. Pythagoras had his own students, and he was teaching them. So it was kind of cool. I liked hearing all that stuff. So that was unique about it, because I never read another book that so much just gave me the words of the speakers. He, as a writer, really did not interject his opinion that much. He sort of let you know, this is what this one thinks, this is what Aristotle thought of his teachings, this is what Plato thought of his teachings. So you really feel like you're on the inside trying to understand the ancient Greeks, and I like that. Plato was sort of a mystic in many ways. I like Aristotle much better. The biologist, the scholar, the rhetorician, etc. He talked about their creation stories, their moral philosophies. So all of that was good, but I've studied the ancient Greeks a lot. So I really didn't find much new in this book other than the experience of seeing how they viewed all the philosophers who came before him. And he did go into a lot of detail about the Hellenistic philosophers, about all these different schools of philosophy. The Stoics comes from the Greeks. The Cynics, like Diogenes, comes from the Greeks. The Stoics would be like Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. The Skeptics, like Pyrrhonism, okay, all that craziness that led to jerks like Kant, for example. The Epicureans. So I liked all this. The Atomists. I liked all of that, okay? What did I not like about the book? Not a lot of sophisticated analysis. I like when the writer makes commentary. He didn't really make much commentary. He just showed you what they think. He didn't put it together that much. It's sort of like he was just letting you know what they thought rather than summarizing it and putting it into perspective. The other thing is, I think he's an atheist. He acts a little stuck up, like when he briefly mentioned Darwin and Darwinism, like he's in the know because he knows Darwinism. Sorry, pal, I majored in evolutionary biology, and Darwinism is bogus, okay? I really know Darwinism and what it means. I'm not like some little philosophy major who thinks they know what Darwinism means, okay? Darwinism is bogus. It can't explain origin of life. It can't explain macroevolution. It's useful for microevolution, that sort of thing. And what you'll find in atheist books, like if you ever read Richard Dawkins, there's no joie de vivre, no joy of life. They're just sort of, I am an educated person and this is what was said and this is what happened, but we all know that Charles Darwin is the master. Yeah, bullshit. Okay, you don't know. Somebody who hasn't studied biochemistry, molecular biology, hasn't really studied macroevolution or origin of life, you can't even imagine how many millions of times more complicated it is. So it's always the people who don't know it that think that you don't need God to do all this stuff. You need God. It's so far beyond us. So that was what I didn't like about the book. It's a little bit pompous, without a joy of life. There's a lack of jokes, a lack of a sense of humor, a lack of insight, puns, cleverness. Okay, the book by Arthur Herman's much better. The Light in the Cave. Okay, but this is still a good book. It was still worth my time to read it. I still will probably read another one of his books. Okay, but he's sort of barely second tier. Okay, he's not top level source of reading on these subjects. Okay, the best writers are people who love the subject, and Christians with a sense of God and the beauty in life. Life has meaning. An atheist basically says life has no meaning. Well, it's like, okay, pal, if you think life has no meaning, how can you tell me anything meaningful? Okay, that's why atheists are always kind of mediocre in their writing. They don't have joie de vivre. They don't have a sense of life. They have declared that life has no meaning. Well, if you declare life has no meaning, why should I listen to you? You have nothing meaningful to say to me. Okay, so anyways, so that's where I would put it. It was fun to get a sense of how the original Greeks developed their philosophy. And if you haven't read anything by the Greeks, then you'll hear something new. But I really didn't hear too much new in it. But the best people to study the ancient Greeks is people like Rufus Fears and Edith Hamilton, who love the ancient Greeks. And they'll tell you all the beautiful little nuance of it, and that's a lot more fun. Anyways, there it is.